Manchester City complete a historic treble with victory over Inter Milan in the Champions League final. Rodri the match winner as City win the Champions League for the first time and become the 6th English side to win European football's biggest prize. Pep Guardiola underlines his status as one of the greatest managers of all time after sealing a second treble. Good evening and welcome to Sky Sports News on a famous night for Manchester City. 15 years after Sheikh Mansour bought the club, City finally lift the European Cup, and they've become just the second team in English football history to win the treble, following in the footsteps of Manchester United in 1999. Delight then for the fans in Manchester as Rodri scored the goal that sealed a first Champions League trophy for Manchester City. And over to Milan at the San Siro, the mood less than joyous. Inter fans devastated that they couldn't ruin Manchester City's treble. Well, after near misses and absurd exits, Manchester City are finally European champions and treble winners. It was Rodri who scored the only goal in a 1-0 win over Inter Milan. We'll be speaking to our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokol, very shortly indeed. But before we do so, former Manchester City player Keith Curle has been watching it all agonising 90 minutes. But in terms of how this match was won, you said it might come down to a mistake, but it came down to a clinical finish from one of their most dependable players. Yeah,
I think he's had a fantastic season, as have all the players at City. I think everybody will say now it wasn't the final that they expected. I think credit will go to Inter Milan because I think they made it very, very difficult. City will be slightly disappointed. Pep will be slightly disappointed because of the standards that he sets about some of the passes that went astray and made the game more difficult for them. But City showed a resolve today that's finding another way to win. You've got to say Ederson has won them the cup with the two fantastic saves.
Well, I mean, we should talk about that, shouldn't we? Because in terms of taking chances, Rodri took his when he was given that opportunity. It opened up for him. He curled it around the two Inter men in his way. But there were some great chances after that for Inter Milan, weren't there?
Again, and it's not just City. I think any team are fragile. Or can be frail where balls coming in the box and there's a willingness and the opposition's getting numbers into the box, and that was shown today. Every time the ball's going into wide areas, I'm saying you've got to stop the cross. You've got to stop the cross because it's a goal scoring opportunity. Ederson today came out, made 2 great saves, took the pressure off when was needed again, and I didn't think he started the game the best.
Well, I was going to say he was jittery. I mean, he made a little bit of a kind of uncertain start, shall we say? And I remember he booted the ball into the gods, and it was he was playing passes that perhaps weren't as secure as he normally is expected to make. But in terms of keeping cool heads, who were the other players that you looked to who did actually deliver that? And once the City settled down, they were the ones who led on the pitch.
Yeah, I've got to say, Gundogan again. He's a player that can go slightly under unnoticed, but he makes good decisions. Silva,
apart from scoring volleys in cup finals.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean.
I was glad
he runs the game, but in his own quiet, understated way.
I was glad when Kyle Walker came on at the end. He gives me that assurance and I think he gives other players that assurance with his recovery runs and his dynamic pace again. But no, again, I think there's a team ethic. There's a togetherness, not only of the team, of the football club, which I think is vitally important. Everybody is on the same page.
Well, you mentioned Ederson there, you mentioned Rodri. We should also mention 2 players that went off the field of play before the 90 minutes. Kevin De Bruyne, crucially in that first half. How much might that have rocked City? And Inter at one point felt like they were in the game and maybe could have made even more of a contest because of that.
And I think it happened just as Kevin went off. I think that gave Inter a lift, thinking, well, one of the pieces of jigsaw from the City team is now missing. But again, Phil Foden, he's not a bad replacement, is he? So when he came back in. But again, Kevin De Bruyne missing gave them a lift. Then City needed to readjust, and I think they did. As it happens, Phil Foden could have scored, could have made the difference.
Had a great chance, didn't he? Through on goal, Andre Onana with a comfortable save away to his left. And also just a word for John Stones, because, you know, he's had this incredible, you know, a different season where he's transitioned into this sort of hybrid position in between a sort of a centre-back and a midfielder. How do you feel that what will this mean to him, especially given that context?
Excellent. I think he's probably the one that, the last 5-6 minutes of the game, I wanted John Stones on the pitch because, you know, his bravery, his personality, his determination, his aerial ability, his physicality in the box. You want the John Stones in the team. You don't want him stood in the dugout watching the last couple of minutes, because you know he would go and put his head on it. But again, first half, and this is just a personal opinion, I think he played a little bit too far forward, because then on the transitions too quickly into we're able to get 3v3, 4v3 at times, and you're saying, well, John, you're going to be a defensive midfield player, not an attacking midfield player.
Stay right there, Keith. We'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go live now to Istanbul and to the Ataturk Olympic Stadium and join our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokol. Kaveh, what about what this result means, the magnitude of this win, this triumph, and to finally lift that trophy that they've so craved?
Yes, I mean, if you're a Manchester City supporter, it does not get better than this. Manchester City have become only the second English team to win the treble. They have emulated what their great rivals Manchester United did back in 1999. And you have to keep in mind that when Manchester United won the treble 24 years ago, Manchester City were actually in the third tier. A couple of days after United won the treble, they played in the Division 1, I think it was called in those days, which was basically the third level playoff against Gillingham, and they were 2-0 down with a few minutes left. So it's been an incredible journey for some of these Manchester City supporters who've been there for the whole time, back to when City used to play at Main Road, back to when Manchester City were almost a joke. People used to refer to Main Road as the theatre of a comedy. I used to remember that phrase being used on the radio when I used to listen to radio commentaries from Main Road. But look, an incredible achievement, a perfect season as far as City supporters are concerned. They won the league. Arsenal pushed them a lot of the way, but in the end, they won the title pretty comfortably. FA Cup final as well. They didn't really have to be at their best to beat Manchester United. And this evening, I think it was a little bit harder than a lot of people thought it was going to be, because I thought Inter Milan played very, very well indeed. But you never got the feeling that Inter were going to win this game, because Manchester City just looked so dangerous going forward, and yet again you see the strength in depth they've got on the bench with players like Phil Foden coming in. And you have to say that over the 90 minutes it was fully deserved, and over the course of the season the treble fully deserved.
Let's talk about that word, because it's been the T word that Manchester City fans have been hoping for such a long time. And for Pep Guardiola, the second time he's achieved it after doing it with Barcelona in 2009. What's the significance of this for Pep?
Well, look, everybody knows already that he's the best coach in the world. I mean, what he does with players, the way he innovates, the way he improves already brilliant players is quite remarkable. And the funny thing about the technical area at this stadium behind me, it was so big that Pep Guardiola at times almost seemed like he was taking part in the game. Both him and Simone Inzaghi were involved from the very first second to the last second. He was animated, he was arguing with his players, he was urging the Manchester City supporters to turn up the volume and back their supporters more. But I don't think Pep Guardiola's reputation rested on what happened here tonight. Even if City had lost, I'm pretty sure that they would have gone and won the European Cup at some point under Pep Guardiola, because they are just such a great side, such a great squad. And in Pep Guardiola, of course, they have one of the greatest managers of all time.
And how much relief will there be amongst the people who own Manchester City? Because this is the reason they brought in Pep Guardiola. They finally got the pop they want.
Yes, I mean, I think it was very significant that Sheikh Mansour, the Manchester City owner, was here to side for only the second time since he bought the club in 2008. I think he watched them back in 2010 when they beat Liverpool 3-0 in a Premier League game. He had not watched Manchester City in the flesh since then, except I think for a couple of friendlies in the UAE. But he was here this evening. I'm sure he'll be very delighted. And you have to keep in mind as well, looking back all those years, when he did buy Manchester City, I think he only spent about £200 million. And at the moment, there are people trying to buy Manchester United for £5 billion. So what he has done is remarkable. Of course, lots of managers before Pep Guardiola have won the title at City as well. I'm thinking of Roberto Mancini. I'm thinking of Manuel Pellegrini as well. But Pep Guardiola has really taken them to another level. And now they joined that select group of English clubs who have lifted the European Cup. I'm thinking, of course, of Liverpool. I'm thinking of Manchester United. I'm thinking of Chelsea. I'm thinking of Aston Villa. I'm thinking of Nottingham Forest, who did it twice under Brian Clough. And let's not forget Celtic as well, because they were the first British side to lift the European Cup as well. So dream come true for City supporters, dream come true for the players, Pep Guardiola, his coaching staff, and of course the people who run and own Manchester City.
And in some ways, especially as far as personnel's been concerned, Kabe, it's been a season of transition for City, letting the likes of Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus go, and then of course Joao Cancelo. But clearly one of the key moves was bringing in Erling Haaland. 52 goals in all competitions this season, not on the score sheet tonight, but I mean, you talk about taking City to another level. This is a man who's done exactly that, isn't he?
It is. I mean, the impact he's had on English football has been incredible. And he didn't score tonight, as you mentioned. This is his longest ever goal drought in the Champions League. This is the first time he's gone 3 full games without scoring a goal. And I think his goal-scoring record at the end of this season has been pretty poor by his standards. I think he's only scored once in the past 8 games. But 52 goals in 53 games. I mean, he has done exactly what Pep Guardiola wanted from him. His impact has been incredible. I know there were a few doubts at the beginning of this season. People were scratching their heads and wondering whether he could fit into Manchester City's style of play, whether he was Pep Guardiola's kind of player. Well, he silenced all those critics because he's had an incredible season, and he didn't score tonight, but he was still a real handful for Inter's defence. The way he stretches their 3 centre-backs, creating space for some of City's other players to do what they're good at. I've just got to say a word as well about Inter Milan, because a lot of people didn't expect them to do very much at all this evening, but I thought they played very, very well indeed. And I think the key moment for them, I think it was in the 88th minute, right at the end of the game, where they had that golden chance that fell to Romelu Lukaku. He had a free header just a couple of yards out. All he had to do was place that header either side of Ederson, but unfortunately he headed it down straight at Ederson. If that had gone in, there's a very, very good chance that the game would have ended 1-1 and we would be playing extra time at the moment. So I know City are going to dominate all the headlines, rightly so. An incredible achievement to win the treble. But let's not forget Inter Milan as well, because I thought they played exceptionally well this evening.
And what about in terms of the state of play in Europe as a whole? In the last 5 Champions League finals, 3 of them have been won by English sides. Liverpool in 2019, Chelsea in 2021 and Manchester City this time around. And we've also had 3 runners-up who have been English as well. Tottenham in 2019, City in 21 and Liverpool last season when they lost to Real Madrid in Paris. Is there any discussion of the fact that being the Premier League is the strongest league in the world, but also the English sides are now regularly, consistently the very top teams in this competition as well?
Yeah, we're going almost back to the sort of 80s, when late 70s and 80s, when English clubs used to dominate the European Cup, as it was called in those days. Yes, of course, speak to anybody in football and they will tell you that when it comes to the world leagues, the Premier League is by far the strongest, the most watched, the most popular, the richest league as well. And quite a lot of the other big clubs in Europe are scratching their heads wondering what they can do to compete with these big Premier League clubs. A lot of people, of course, watch the kind of football that Manchester City play. They admire it. They admire what Pep Guardiola has done. But at the same time, they look at it and think, we just can't compete with this. We cannot spend the same kind of money that clubs like Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea have been spending. But I think it would be a mistake to characterise Manchester City's achievements under Pep Guardiola as being just down to money. Yes, of course, a lot of money has been spent at Manchester City. I think since Sheikh Mansour bought the club, their net spend has been more than any other club in the world. But in the past few years, they have been bringing that down. Other clubs like Manchester United have been spending more money than them. But European clubs, you know, the aristocrats of European football, clubs like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Juventus, even PSG financially at the moment cannot compete with not just Manchester City, but lots of other clubs in the Premier League as well. And that is one of the reasons why people were going around trying to set up a European Super League, because they want to figure out a way to compete with the power of the Premier League. I think a lot of people will be hoping, look, we had phases in the past where, for instance, Serie A was the strongest league in the world. Then we had La Liga dominating with Real Madrid and that great Barcelona sides. And now it's the turn of the Premier League. At the moment, it looks like it's going to last forever, but who knows what's going to happen in the future.